Welcome to the Trauma Informed Lens podcast. I'm your host, Matt Bennett. Each episode we talk about the research and practical aspects of the trauma informed movement. This podcast is not designed to replace mental health services. If you feel uncomfortable or triggered by our discussion, please consider seeking your own trauma treatment. In no way is seeking treatment an admission of weakness. It is a chance to build resiliency and experience post-traumatic growth. You can find show notes, resources, and more at traumainformedlens.org. Welcome to the Trauma Informed Lens podcast. I am Matt. I'm here today just to do a quick introduction. We were actually, Jeff Summers and I were doing an episode of the Heart Rate Variability podcast about how to look at the upcoming transitions back into quote unquote the new normal. So I thought this would be a great one to get on the radars of listeners of the Trauma Informed Lens podcast, as I know that self-care needs to be a huge focus. Not just coming out of maybe one of the toughest stretches in my lifetime, both with COVID, but also we've had a huge push for civil rights. We've had a crazy political environment, and very few of us have had a chance to fully recover from this as we transition once again into a different work environment. So in this episode, we talk a little bit about heart rate variability, but we talk a lot about transitions as well. So I thought this would be a great episode to have a little bit of a crossover. So I hope you enjoy this show of the Trauma Informed Lens / Heart Rate Variability podcast. Take care and talk to everybody soon.
Hey, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Heart Rate Variability podcast. Jeff Summers here with my partner in crime, Matt Bennett.
Hey,
Matt.
Jeff.
How are you?
Good, Jeff. How are you doing this morning?
Good, man. It was 80 degrees all weekend.
I know.
Early April in Denver, Colorado. We were outside in shorts and t-shirts, man. Fantastic.
Yep, only snowed once last week, and I can't remember when the last week we haven't had snow, even if we get like an 80-degree day in. So that we were talking about, it's spring in Denver when it rains. Doesn't mean it's not nice. Like last week was mostly beautiful, but moisture usually turns into snow this time of year. So get that good rain. There's still some snow left over from last one's all nice and icy in places. So get that good first hard rain. So
that's it. And epic basketball on Saturday for sports fans. It's been a while since we've talked basketball. So
yeah, I know. I would also just throw out there Friday and Sunday as well. I have become a huge fan of the women's tournament, and last night, the Stanford Arizona game. This young lady McDonald on Arizona is just one of the most dominant guards I've seen in a long time on any level. And had last second shot down by one, and it was close. So I would say besides that dud of a game that I thought was going to be good with Houston and Baylor on the men's side. Right. Boy, college basketball did not disappoint, this weekend.
Into April, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's great.
Who are you going to predict? It'll be a prediction set in stone when this comes out. So,
that's true.
Tonight?
People, exactly.
Gonzaga.
I mean, I guess I got to go with the Zags at this point. You hit a shot like that, it feels like it's just meant to be, man. Although I would love to see the statistics on how many teams, what their record is in the next game after, miraculous buzzer beaters like that. It would be very interesting.
Exactly.
What about you?
I just got to go with Baylor just because I grew up as an IU fan in that 1976 team, kind of the Mount Rushmore of basketball teams of my, obviously I was 2 at the time that team happened, but that team was just legendary, rightfully so. If you ever watch, that's what I've been loving about women's basketball, because if you watch, especially the Michigan IU games back from that year, because Michigan was actually in the championship game as well. That's when the Big Ten was good at basketball. That basketball was just so up and down, and the talent on those teams. Michigan might have been one of the top 10 teams of all time that year as well, though IU beat them 3 times, throughout the season. And, so I gotta, it's no 2 teams I don't usually root for. I think it's going to be a good game, but I just got to keep my Rushmore intact. So I'm not ready to say that Gonzaga team, even though they are really good. I'm not ready to put them up there. I'm not even ready to put them up there with the UNLV team. Sure. I'd love to see them play a team like that. And Baylor, after what they did to Houston, might beat that team. So, yeah, I'm interested. Now that we've totally dated ourselves with this introduction,
we should actually talk about what we plan to talk about, which I think honestly is a really interesting subject. When we had the idea for this as a podcast episode, I was fully on board. Obviously a lot has changed in the last year, and people literally overnight had to totally readjust to what a world in a pandemic looked like. And now here we are 13 months later, we've got vaccinations going on, all across the country at an increasing rate. And so our world's going to change again.
Yeah.
And, you look at the frontline workers and all the people that are, helping to keep people healthy, and, the amount of stress they've been under over the last 13 months. Things are going to change again. And so, I'm really interested to get your take on what that recovery process is going to look like, how we can utilize HRV to, play a role in the self-care that's going to be required. And, you can't just flip a switch and say, let's go back to normal and not expect, some challenges around that. So,
absolutely. And I want to get, why I wanted to do these, and us being as organic as we are, who knows how long we can talk about this subject, because I think it's critical right now. And there's a couple things that I'm really concerned that I'm hearing, both when I talk to leaders, but also just talking to staff, whether I'm doing self-care training, I'm doing a lot of leadership trainings right now, trying to get leaders, managers, this on their radar. But for individuals as well, is I use this definition in my trauma trainings called chronic trauma. And the definition of chronic trauma is being under a large amount of stress, an abnormally large amount of stress for a sustained period of time, with the threat of a traumatic event happening. And I just want everybody to reflect. I mean, we're recording this on April 5th, so I'm going to say 13 months back. I know people might be listening to this, and this might be a historical artifact 2 years from now. But where we're at now, we can almost say, I'm just going to use 13 months, as we've been under this pressure now for 13 months. So when you think about a chronic trauma, and for those that know me, I don't throw the word trauma around loosely. Don't tell me unless an accident happened that your commute was traumatic, right? Or this meeting was traumatic. Those things can be traumatic, but something traumatic better have happened. But what we know is when we're under a high amount of stress, like I said, it's not just like, hey, we're going through kind of an intense part of work, but that a large amount of stress with the threat of trauma happening. Because, while I'm fortunate enough to be, even though I'm getting up there, I'm 46, I believe still. I just stopped doing the math. And I'm relatively healthy for my age. So while I haven't really worried that I die of COVID, having parents, step parents, and a grandmother still alive, all 70 and above, I didn't know at times if my family would make it out of here, with everybody alive, and that worry. My sister, a month or so, and my nephews got it again, healthy. But you hear about those exceptions to the rule. So we've been under this extraordinary amount of stress for an extended 13 months is too long. That's one of the messages I really want to do this podcast, to say too long. And, every day we've been worried about the health of maybe if you're into helping or healing professions, those we serve. Most organizations I've worked with have had at least somebody get extremely sick, if not pass away, that they serve from COVID. Coworkers might have passed away, family members might have passed away. And we've been under this stress for too long. And then, Jeff, the other thing I think about, and I know you're more connected to the young parenting community than I am, but I just think about like all these, as I got a first grade classroom being conducted over in my bedroom right now, just to appreciate that this hasn't just impacted our work life or our personal life. It has been this unique sort of trauma that has transcended the work-life balance, and having to, are my kids getting the education they need during this time span? Well, what impact does it have if my child wasn't able to play their senior year of basketball or go to prom? And some of that can seem pretty superficial when we talk about people dying, but I know that this is a huge concern for folks, and I think we can shrug it off. And I've been impressed with some of the youth that they interviewed, especially early on in this pandemic, to say, yeah, especially like the baseball, the spring sport players, yeah, I'm really going to miss this next year, but people are dying. Like I think they handled it better than some of the adults did. But, we see this from all these different perspectives. And I think I want to just take this break to kind of step back a little bit and just say, you listener, you have been carrying around too much stress, an unhealthy amount of stress for too long of a period of time. And I don't know all of our listeners. I haven't done an assessment on any of them. So I can't diagnose you with trauma. But however, I can sit back here after dealing with for 13 months. And Jeff, you've known the ups and downs professionally, but both with Optimal HRV, which, our whole launch, got delayed substantially. But, I was kind of paying my mortgage being an in-person trainer as well. And just sort of those ups and downs. The last 13 months has been traumatic for me. Am I doing okay? My HRV says more days than not. Yeah. However, I know that this has been traumatic, and I need to treat it that way. And I want to kind of pause there and get some of your feedback. But I just really wanted to start out this episode that unless you convince me otherwise, I believe that I have the science, the research to show most people listening to this, because of the intense amount of stress. And I'll talk about why 13 months is important, and just the worry we've been carrying around for maybe our own health, but our loved ones, our community members, our clients, our patients, that we're coming out of this traumatized. And Jeff, I'd love to just get your thoughts on what's coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I can, speak from personal experience, and, especially when you talk about being a parent to young children, how challenging that was. And, especially for my wife who's home with the kids, not having any sort of help for so long, and help is all sorts of things. It's story time at the library. It's, childcare at the gym. It's just little breaks that as a parent you really look forward to, that give you a chance to, just do your thing, and have some time to think, or some time to be physically active, or, just some time to be a human and not just a parent. And all that disappeared. And, I can tell you how difficult that was for me, but more so for my wife, in terms of all of your options, babysitters, grandparents, all those things weren't around for a very long time. And a lot of it's still not back yet. You still can't go to story time at the library. You still can't, do those things yet in a lot of places. So, Absolutely, you know, and it's traumatic. It's difficult. The level of stress that people are carrying around is huge. I mean, it's kind of funny. We were talking about it. I was at a park with the kids on Saturday, that same park that I was at maybe 2 months ago. I was out with my dad, so it was his part of town. And 2 months ago, I would say probably 70% of the people wearing masks, kind of keeping their distance, you know, doing the quote unquote right thing for the pandemic. On Saturday, I was one of like 3 people. I mean, everybody had just sort of given up, right? And so, you know, it's just sort of this concept of, okay, now things are good, but to your point, what does that mean? It felt weird, you know. It's like, whoa, why is it weird to see people's faces? And why is it, you know, you got so used to keeping your distance at the grocery store? You know, those kinds of things are habits we've gotten into that are going to be just interesting to see how long it takes to get out of. So I know you've got some really good statistics to share and some good information in terms of, you know, how long it takes to develop new habits and, you know, all of those kinds of things. But you know, you just think your personal life and the things you do on a day-to-day basis have all totally changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we talked about in earlier episodes homeostasis and how our body, and this is an unconscious process, autonomic nervous system. We talked about the ventral vagal, sympathetic, dorsal vagal nerves as that polyvagal ladder. And I really encourage folks who might have jumped in a little bit later into our series to consider going back to the beginning. Also, all this is in the free book at optimalhrv.com as well, which you can download to get some of this information. But we know that we are great as human beings. And I'm going to use an extreme example of this and then bring it back to our present time is we are amazing at creating a balance between us and our environment. And my work in homelessness has taught me this really well is there's unfortunately in our country, thousands of people who woke up around our country today in a homeless shelter. And that is their normal Monday morning. Especially we use the word chronic homelessness to talk about folks, unfortunately, who've been living out unhoused for, you know, years. And while Jeff, I imagine if I took away your wallet, I took away all your contacts, I took away my couch and every other couch that you'd be able to crash on if you really needed it, and, you know, threw you in a shelter and you had no money, you had no friends, you had no family to reach out to, probably would be a traumatic event for you. Whereas these folks have built up the resiliency to homelessness. It's their normal Monday morning. And I'm not saying that in any way to minimize the impact of homelessness. And in other words, one of the uses for chronic trauma, you know, is that you're under that intense amount of stress. So even though Monday morning waking up in a shelter might be normal, it doesn't mean that there's not a long-term consequence to creating a homeostasis to an incredibly high stress environment with the threat. If you look at statistically with violence or assaults, you know, we know that community is incredibly vulnerable, you know, to a whole range of issues. So let's take that extreme because this has been an extreme for a lot of us as well. And while I'm not comparing the experience of homelessness to us doing more stuff over Zoom, you know, that there is a difference there. But from our homeostasis, you know, as folks that might work in a more of an office setting, or Jeff, I know you and I used to travel a lot. We live very different lives, and we adjusted to that was our normal. And then my wife would go to school every day and teach first graders. And all of a sudden 13 months ago, a lot of us, and I just want to acknowledge for those who couldn't make this shift, whether you worked at a grocery store, a hospital, a homeless shelter, whatever it is, because I think sometimes we're like, well, we all made the shift. Well, no, some people kept going to work every day and putting their lives at risk to keep society going. So obviously that group experienced a tremendous amount of personal threat and danger of continuing their work as well. So I'm going to use the trauma to what they've gone through as well. But for us that made the shift is we had to make a shift without much preparation and thinking. My wife, I think, was lucky because this kind of hit up last year against her spring break. So she got almost 2 weeks, because they couldn't go back to school before it, to start to prepare for a whole different job. Really? Virtual teaching, it's kind of like me on Zoom, very different, but I can just come and do the Matt show and my trainings, which is a lot like me get on an airplane and doing it in a big room. Doing a first grade class over it, totally different way of training. So we, a little over a year ago, had to make a quick adjustment. And there is a cost to that I don't think a lot of us have felt yet. There was that, because we had to keep going in and really surviving our jobs changing overnight. And that had a cost to a lot of us. And I think we have been so in survival mode with this that we haven't really felt it in some way yet. And then we know that it takes, there's kind of this myth of 21 days to form a new habit. If you want somebody to make a change, you can still use 21 days, but we see the neurobiological sort of response to changes in environment takes about 66 days. Like I say, if you want to lie to somebody, try to get them to eat healthier or quit smoking, just keep using 21 days, because to get to 66 days, you have to get to 21 days, and I'm all about the placebo effect. So I'm not saying if you want to be manipulative, you can use it, but we're looking at about 66 days. And just think back outside maybe folks with Katrina and other natural disasters. I'm trying to think about other shared traumas that lasted that long, with the ongoing threat of death to you or those you love. Because the numbers didn't get better. Like, they may have dipped back, but we may be, like we were talking before this, are we entering another wave of this? Because I know a lot of people who traveled for spring break who were not vaccinated yet, and I gave them some advice. They didn't listen to it. But anyway, so we have, because we're resilient, because human beings are resilient, we've had way more than that 66 days to adjust to this new reality we've all been. I also like to throw out there, just as I'll do, we also had the biggest civil rights movement in my lifetime happen just a few months ago. And I think for a lot of us watching the trial, and all I can really honestly take is the highlights of it. Most of it happens during my work day, but I mean, just the highlights every night are bringing back a lot. And I'm a white man of privilege, and it's really hard and re-triggering for me. And I don't even want to pretend that I have any idea what it's like for folks of color in our community who've experienced systematic racism in their life. So not comparing it, but it's hard to watch that. The craziest political stretch in my lifetime all happen. We're carrying all this forward. And I think some of us, like, I try to watch the news now. It's so boring. Like, it's like, what happened? Joe Biden? Like, boring. What? He didn't tweet something? Like, there's no, like, it's just
no
like
controversy. What's going on?
I know. It's like, I was like watching the Sunday shows. And again, outside the trial, it's like, this is boring. Like, it used to be like 2 hours of great television, Sunday morning news shows. But now it's like, oh, okay, we actually had an infrastructure week. It's with a plan. Like, wow, that's exciting. So we've really, there's been other traumas, so to speak, for a lot of us within these pieces as well. Like I said, I think we're hitting like the 3-month anniversary of our nation's capital being taken over. That was only 3 months ago, right? And so maybe 4 now, 4 months ago. But, for a lot of us, it seems like a different lifetime. So we have, because human beings do this, we have created a homeostasis or balance to this new environment. Now, the thing that I want to put on people's radar is transitioning back into new normal, and I'm doing air quotes just for our listeners there. I hate air quotes, but I got to do them, is we're going to disrupt homeostasis again. And that is, like I said, Jeff, I want to pause and get any thoughts you have here and questions you have. But we are now, if we're going to go back into the office, I shared with you, you went to the park. I was kind of scouting out locations for us to watch the finals tonight, and walked by a dive bar on my street, and it looked like pre-pandemic. Like, and I looked at that and I was like, oh no, I'm not personally vaccinated yet. I will think about things differently once I'm like, oh, there's no, I think I even crossed the street. Like, I hope everybody in there is vaccinated. Good luck. I'm not walking in there till I get the second shot. But there is this like piece that we're doing. And so, I think it's important to put on people's radar is our biology our neurobiology has adjusted to the normal. So don't just think about transitioning back into what life was 14 months ago is going to be a relief for us. In fact,
right, which is what we think.
Exactly. I think for
leaders, like, I can't wait to get back to normal. How many people have you heard say that?
Exactly. And especially for leaders and managers out there, I think human beings, especially in the fields I'm in, we were designed to survive this pandemic. We got to step up to help other people. We've got to be the best of ourselves. Yeah, we can do that for 13 months. I'm afraid now we've got to take care of ourselves, give ourselves a chance to recover while helping everybody else still adjust to this. And I think I'm really afraid what we're going to see with rates of heart attacks and other things coming out of this is there's a huge thing facing us. And it is right. It's coming up for a lot of us in the next few months and few weeks.
So I guess a question that I would love to get your thoughts on. So obviously it was a huge adjustment 13 months ago. How much harder is it going to be to adjust again in such a short period of time, right? I mean, it's difficult enough the first time, but I would assume that, the shorter time span to which you have to make such a big adjustment, does it make it easier because you just went through it? Does it make it more difficult because you haven't recovered from that process in such a short period of time? What does science tell us?
Great question. So one is, how are you doing right now? And I'm assuming that most of our mental, physical, emotional, social health is worse than it was 14 months ago. Just because, again, it's not only been the pandemic that we have been through. So I'm assuming for most of us, I know this is, and I've just come out, I'm going to get therapy this summer. Like, I need some cognitive behavioral therapy this summer. Like, I'm doing okay. I've got HRV data to show I'm doing okay, but I'm not doing okay. Like, I know there's things that I probably even thought about that I'm carrying forward. So on one hand, and again, if I got any leaders or managers out there, I really want you to hear this. We have time to plan and gradually work our way back into this transition. But I also see, Jeff, leaders are also really burned out and traumatized right now. So we've got a lot of folks who are just like, once we get the shot, we can all come back. Everything will go back to normal.
Like it never happened.
And how do I see this manifesting in, ways that I kind of understand is, do any of my clothes fit? Like, do I still like my coworkers after all this time in Zoom? I kind of don't like commuting to work.
Right. Do I want to be back in the office?
I think there's a fear of that some of us may have developed like social anxiety disorder. I think me walking by that bar, like you going to the park, I'm like, I'm not sure when I'm going to be ready for that. Now, another piece really wanted to go into the bar and have a beer, but of course, yeah. That was like 10%, 90% wanted to run the other direction and just pray that everybody was vaccinated in there. But, so like my response to the bar, your response to the park, I think a lot of people, I think for you and I, what's it going to be like to get on an airplane again? Now, I think we're both very excited for that potential at some point. But at the same time, well, what's it going to be like to be in a contained area with 150 or so other people? You know, is everybody going to be wearing masks? Are we set? You know, all those things come up. So, you know, I think that there's a lot more anxiety there. And I think managers have got to be particularly careful because we do have a time to plan this transition back, and the new normal might be a lot more flexible and actually better. I think a lot of meetings that I go to aren't going to go back to why would we all drive a half hour to go to a meeting? Maybe we do that once a month. Right. But hey, we can give people 3 hours back if they're not commuting back and forth to these meetings. Yep. Might be better. You know, I know, you know, I think just with our company, we're working with people on different continents now. Like, you know, would that have been like teams are now bigger? So, you know, that there is this planning, but the question I have and what I'm afraid of is when we get burned out, we get very rigid. So I see a lot of people, and I'm trying to get this on managers' radars as well, as, oh, we'll get everybody vaccinated, we will go back to normal. And that's not how human beings work. So what we know with trauma, and I make an argument, a lot of us are carrying trauma from the last 13 months where our nervous system's just been wrecked by this in ways that we can't now see because it's become our normal. Is, you know, we know that trauma doesn't go away by itself. Now, obviously, if you get out of the traumatic situation, granted that it gets better, but this is why I'm going to therapy this summer, because I know I'm carrying around too much stress in ways I could list out for you on a piece of paper and ways I probably don't even know. So that's going to be part of what I'm calling my recovery plan. And earlier we talked about proactive self-care, where what do we do each day to bring our best self to work? And then reactive, once we realize we may be experiencing some of the triggers for burnout, what do we do to get ourselves back into health and wellness? Well, I would say probably 90% of people listening to this are in the reactive. We are burnt. So what is, maybe it's taken a couple weeks off, at least, getting into therapy for yourself. You know,
offering it to your employees, to your team members, you know.
Absolutely. I'm encouraging, yeah, okay, you have an employee assistance program. Great. Talk to them and get one of their therapists at your site, right, and utilize work time for people to go to therapy, because that's going to be the best investment you can make. Trying to triage paid time off. Well, they've been working at home this whole time. Not a deal, right? We've got to maybe allow people to adjust collectively as a team together. But then we've got to get people on vacation, and we may have to fight them to do that. But it's like, we almost need to triage that in medical talk. So yeah, there's all these factors. And if we don't address them organizationally, we're going to see our turnover rates just skyrocket. If we don't do it personally, we're going to carry this psychological damage on into the future with us. Good thing, stress, this sort of trauma, cognitive behavioral therapy, other best practice approaches. Basically, I don't even worry about the words cognitive behavioral therapy. Let me just say that as a trained mental health professional, we're well equipped to help people through this. This isn't you'll need 6 years to recover from the last 14 months. You know, a lot of employee assistance programs, which people can access for free, 6 sessions. I would imagine for most of us, not all of us, because I didn't have that traumatic event where I had to say goodbye to my father over Zoom because I couldn't go see him as he was passing away because of COVID. You know, the numbers are just so overwhelming about how many people had to do that. So 6 sessions probably enough for me. If you've gone through something like that, you might need more, but we're not talking about even a year for most of us to recover. It's just in many ways processing this. And for leaders, for teammates, giving ourselves, it's just not okay, we're going to write the new reality down. How are people adjusting to this? What's the emotional reaction to coming back into these environments? And a lot of patience, because again, we're taking our homeostasis, which we've been developed for better or worse, from this last, again, 66 days. way more than that, right? Many times more than that. We are hardwired now for the COVID normal. So transitioning back, and I'm not going to compare it to transitioning into COVID normal from pre-pandemic, that was horrible, right? This is going to be better than that, but our baseline point has been diminished so much by the stress that we are way worse equipped for this transition. And this is what I'm just telling leaders right now. Yeah, the last 13 months has been, to this point, the biggest leadership challenge I can think of in my entire lifetime. The only thing I can compare to, which I was too young in my career to really experience it, is when the HIV/AIDS epidemic, before the medicines hit. I just hear stories of that. So that was in my lifetime, though it wasn't in my professional lifetime. This has been, in my professional lifetime, the biggest challenge by far. But I really think the next year is going to be even more challenging, because we're going to take all this pain and suffering, stress and trauma, and we've got to just not get people back to normal, but give them the recovery to get ourselves back up to the level of productivity, efficiency, to minimize turnover throughout this time, in order to keep the doors open, keep delivering great services, whatever that means for your organization. So, I'm just worried that leaders, and again, leaders, you're a human being as well. You are not equipped probably psychologically, because like me, a lot of you are carrying trauma around. You've got to be those role models. So from that individual perspective, I'm just telling leaders this, Jeff. I'm flat out. Usually I'm nice, you know me. I'm nice. I don't want to be too assertive. Like, right. I just, I like people to like me. You got to go to therapy. If you are a leader or manager, you got to go to therapy. You need to access your EAP program yourself. 2 reasons. 1, there's a 95% chance you need it. 2, even if you're in the 5%, I don't care. You need to give your staff a first-hand account about what it's like to access your EAP, and you are the role model for this. So this is a type of language that I don't usually use with folks. It's like, maybe think about this. Nope. You got to, and go to the EAP program and have the EAP professional tell you you don't need them. Okay. Great. Right now you can tell firsthand is, hey, to your staff, just think about how powerful this is, especially with the ongoing stigma around mental health with old fogies like me, because the youth, this is not coming up in the next generation, which maybe we did something okay, Jeff, that the next generation is not carrying this stupid stigma around mental health, acknowledging the mental health professions have not always been the greatest, and we deserve some of that stigma. But, go in there, get it yourself, give a firsthand account. You likely need 6 sessions yourself. It's going to make you a better leader, because you're going to have to hold that stress of everybody coming back. And you've held that stress now for 13 months. You need at least 6 sessions. So give that firsthand account. How do you schedule a 2-week vacation? Because if you aren't the role model for this, but you just give verb language to it, people are going to look at your actions, especially when they're stressed out. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And just the awareness around that, the awareness that this is, bordering on traumatic for folks and very traumatic for others. And it being okay with that, accepting it, and saying, hey, let's deal with this head on, instead of just assume, I'm resilient, I can just get through this, I don't need help. That's always it's not necessarily the right way to approach anything, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And if I could, just to kind of wrap us up, what's heart rate variability with this? And for our long-term listeners, hopefully at this point, your brain just kind of fills in the blanks. The interesting thing I want to see with heart rate variability is we had this huge disruption happen back 13 months ago. All of our HRV, I would imagine if we got a huge amount, tens of thousands of data points, took a big hit this time last year. Not to mention a lot of us had COVID, which we also know decreases. So we've been this, but I'll even look at mine. Mine has rebounded now. So let's think about homeostasis. HRV measures how well you're handling or recovering from stress, but it's based on your homeostasis. Now, some folks I know are lower than they were 13 months ago. So that gives you a clear thing that you are still struggling with this. But there's a whole, this is unique, Jeff. I think that when we think about the history of heart rate variability, this is sort of a unique 13 months of data set so collectively is, and I'm proud to say this about my data, it took a hit, but you want to motivate me? Throw a challenge at me, right? I talked about my post-traumatic growth and my own trauma. Okay, that, like what we do, start a company in Wales, bring on a couple new partners. I wrote a book. We started this podcast. Like, we didn't just sit around and mourn that we weren't going to do this, right? So that's how I deal with stress, is not sitting around. I will probably start 10 more things than need be, and hopefully a few are of value, including the podcast and the book. But so I know I dipped, but now I'm back up. I'm up, maybe even a little bit better if I look at my historical data than before. But when I start to transition out of this homeostasis, so again, homeostasis got disrupted. I know I dipped. I was worried, how am I going to pay my mortgage? Those sort of things, like a lot of other people. Got that recovery process, but now I'm at this new homeostasis. So now as I start to travel again, I got my first maybe plane flight to book. I need to check in with them to see if I'm actually get on a plane. But I'm starting to transition out of that homeostasis to be an in-person trainer again. What does that mean? Do my pants still fit? I don't know. Like, I like our audience to believe I'm wearing slacks right now, but
we know that's not true.
My belt still fits with my loose-fitting jeans. That's about all I can tell folks. So I'm going to have this new challenge coming up. So heart rate variability, if you're not doing anything right now, to start to take your heart rate variability, measure your homeostasis right now, even if you don't have the historical data, as you transition, how is that impacting your heart rate variability? It should be normal that we see a decline. The key is when we hit that challenge to our homeostasis, which is going back to the quote unquote new normal, how long are we there? What's the impact, and how do we get back up as well? Because again, I think a lot of us, including myself, I'm afraid of this, we're going to go back to some extent of normal. The last 13 months is going to hit a lot of us like a truck. And so to measure this, to get that insight, I think is just going to be critical to people. And hopefully my words are enough for folks to go get those 6 sessions of therapy if they're available. If not, reach out to your insurance companies. Mental health, you might want to do it now, because I know mental health capacity, a lot of people don't have any room on there to take new clients. So even if you're not thinking, don't want this until a couple months later, reach out now, get on some waiting list, because this recovery is going to be so crucial for us.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, good stuff. I appreciate it. I mean, it's all good. Like I said, very interesting topic, something that I certainly haven't spent as much time thinking about as you have. But, the more we've discussed it, the more important I think it was to, kind of have this discussion. So hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully, it's sort of shed some light on something that a lot of people maybe haven't thought too much about that they should be. So, and to all who are listening to this, that are actual users of Optimal HRV, you'll notice a brand new version that looks a lot different and has some new capabilities. We'd love to get your feedback. So reach out, let us know what's better. If we missed anything, any ideas, we would love to know. Support at optimalhrv.com.
Absolutely. It's fun to take the first reading on the new version. So
I know, and a lot more new things to come in the next couple months, which we'll be divulging little by little every podcast episode. But
absolutely. Everybody take care of yourself. Next week, we'll talk about this from a group perspective as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about the organizational how to help groups, families, those things recover too. So looking forward, Jeff, to that discussion as well.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time.
Have a good week.